Thank you.
Yeah, I managed to lose my routine. I took a nice walk, I walked all the way there and went. And then walked back. No, I think that's where it was, and I think I just like walked like this.
I'm presenting.
Oh, you're back. No problemo.
Perfect, Joe. I was going to text you if I wanted to in this one.
Yeah, it was what I said.
Tristan's here and Sean.
That must be that. I don't know, I probably got some kind of. Maybe we set that one over there.
Some small program. A Sonic program.
Oh, that's, yeah, that's much better.
And she's like, I was like, I think, like some of these like are, $8,000 loans on $100 loans. If they want to wait,
I'll buy you some time. All right, it is 3:31, so we're going to get started. We're having microphone difficulties because presentation wouldn't be complete without some sort of technology issues, so we checked that off the list. So we might have a microphone in a minute. Jill's working on that. But welcome to the infrastructure panel. My name is Nicole. I work at Region 9 Mankato, and we're going to try this. Nothing? I don't know. It is working. Okay. It smells exactly the same to me, but
Try again. Keep
people in the back row, are we good?
I can hear you.
Is it on? I see a red one.
It's on.
I'll just hold it to feel special.
Of-
All right, so we are going to be talking about some infrastructure projects. We have Cam Van Fulk will be up first to talk about industrial park in Boston. Second, Laura Osley will be talking about small cities development program. And then Wayne Hurley with the West Central Initiative will be talking about safe routes to school and active living planning. And then I will take up with the remainder of the time about Highway 169 project. So first up, Cam Van Fulk.
Okay, thank you. The project I'm going to talk about is actually almost as old as I am, and not quite that old, but it's been a long time since we did the project. The city of Boston came to us actually before my time at the RDC, and I've been there for 20 years. So they actually did two different expansions using EDA dollars to increase the size of their industrial park. Foston had issues with wastewater, so they couldn't expand their community, and they couldn't invite businesses into the town unless they first fixed their wastewater situation. So they went ahead and did an anaerobic digester as part of their project, and now since then they've added more storage capacity in their holding ponds and that type of thing. So now they can at least draw business, they can draw residents, whereas before they were pretty much stultified into only being about a 1,500 person community. And they're still about like that, but the advantage to Foston is that they're right on Highway 2, which is a 4-lane going from Grand Forks to Duluth. So they're right on the edge of the lakes. They're kind of a gateway to the Great Plains and a gateway to the lakes country. So they're in a great spot. They're 45 miles from Bemidji, 45 miles from Grand Forks, possibly a little bit further. And so they're kind of in a sweet spot. They were able to put up like a 16,000 square foot grocery store here a few years ago, which is just really a peach. If you ever get up to Foston, go into that grocery store, you can play a damn baseball game inside that thing. It's enormous. So it's kind of cool. Foston has a lot of potential opportunities. So getting back to the industrial park, they have been able to fill their industrial parks in the past. They came to us to do a third expansion, which is about a 45-acre expansion on the side of town. I just want to let you know that this is something that, first of all, you obviously talk with your EDR, your economic development rep. Make sure that it's going to qualify in their eyes, because EDA can be a stickler. There's just all there is to it. The partners in this were EDA, USDA, MnDOT, DEED, state bonding, and I think there was some MIF funding too. I'm sorry, but I didn't go back and look at that. So with the state bonding and with city, some of the city bonding that was done, they were able to meet their match to EDA. This is like a $1.9 million project, so not huge, but pretty big for a little town of 1,500. Changes their whole taxes and all of that stuff. So just remember that when you're going to do an EDA grant and it's going to involve buying land, you're probably going to have to be talking to a lot of different people, especially if you change the drainage of that land. So you're going to be talking to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, you'll be talking possibly even to the U.S. Corps of Engineers, you'll be talking to the State Historic Preservation Office, because you need to make sure that there aren't any Native American burial sites or anything like that. That's not something to joke about, because that happened in Warren, Minnesota just a couple years ago, where a guy was building his house. They discovered some Native American bones and they thought it might be a burial site. It held up the construction of his house for 6 months. So it can hold you up if you don't, well, you're required to go through that process, so you have to talk to those people. You're going to need township and city approvals, obviously. The watershed, like I said, if you change any drainage or ditches, the watershed is going to have to play a role in approving it. Your project may ask for tax abatement from the county. I generally don't deal with that. That's in the city's responsibility to go to the county and ask for that abatement process. And basically, that's just abating taxes on school board and city and county and township and that kind of stuff. They all need to approve it. And we've had some projects where the school board wouldn't approve it because they don't want to lose that cash. They need every bit they can get. You all, I'm sure, have read through the process of applying for a public works grant. How much time have I got?
You totally did.
Okay, that doesn't mean anything to me, but. Okay. Okay, so anyway, you know, there's obviously forms that you're going to have to fill out to do your EDA Public Works project, which is what this was. You're going to need to show that there's ancillary business potential, other businesses that will hopefully quickly enter into that industrial park. They need to create jobs, they need to create wealth, they need to, we need to talk about what the economic development is, or economic impact, I'm sorry, for not only the city but the region. In the case of Floston, it's not necessarily in a distressed area, but I will frankly tell you, when I've dealt with EDA in the past, if they like the project, it really doesn't matter if you have distress factors. Now, don't take my word as golden, but it's what I noticed when I did 2 different EDA grants in the same year, got them both approved. I thought one of them was just nutty, and they were wild about it. So go figure. I mean, the EDR came up and said, yeah, do your application, I think it's golden. So I think they really needed some Minnesota projects out here, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, getting back to the forms, you know, you need to show that ancillary businesses are gonna set up on site there. You'll probably have to provide what the pay scales are gonna be. And when you tell a story about what your application is, tell the story and try to include distress factors even if they don't count. So like in the case of this year where we have a disaster declaration for western Minnesota, you know, whether it meets distress factors or not, and our unemployment, basically, you know, those types of things. What am I trying to say? You still want to tie the story, at least in my estimation, where you're showing that economic impact is so important for the region. It's using your local production. You're creating jobs and businesses. You're you know, working in concert with all of these different partners. You've got a lot of private, public participation. Those are all great things. I love to hear that. But try to tell the story. Don't be so matter of fact. I mean, I think a story makes a big difference to the guys that read this thing, or the people that read this thing, and it just makes a difference. Especially in our region where this disaster declaration has really affected us. I know it has all over the state, but in my area, ag is enormous, and when it's wet and we can't get sugar beets out or soybeans out, we're in deep trouble. So this weather has got to stay like this for a long time. So that's really it. One thing I did notice the last time I did one of these is that EDA specifically told me they didn't want to see any letters of support. Now, I know that that's a big deal for a lot of different projects, and people want to include it because they want to show that everybody supports this thing. That's great, except that EDA was telling me, don't even put it in the application because they made it sound like it was going to be a strike against me. So I went and told Colin Peterson's staff that, and they blew their stack. I mean, they went crazy. They said, well, you're going to get a goddamn letter, whether you want it or not. And I said, well, it isn't whether I want it, it's whether EDA wants it. You fund them, so I'm going to do what you tell me to do. So I always try to bend over for the people who have the money, and Congress controls the purse strings, and they also are able to chew the backside of, you know, these agencies and stuff like that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I really had great support from EDA on this project. We're actually looking at doing a 4th one now for Floston. They've managed to fill about 120 acres in 3 different projects of industrial park space. And we'll probably be adding another 40 or 50. So it's pretty cool. EDA loves to come back and you know, basically reinforce projects that they've already done. Business incubators, they dig that too, and if you can put a business incubator in your industrial park, I'd say you're probably in pretty good shape. Anyway, that's all I got. I don't know who's next. So. Okay.
Well, my name is Laura Osley, and I'm one of the community development planners at the Upper Minnesota Valley Regional Development Commission. And what I'm going to be talking about today is our one of our programs that we've been running through our office for many, many years, and that's our Small Cities Development Program that is administered through the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. These funds actually do come out of HUD, so they're community development block grants. So they do have purpose that we have to make sure that we're following for these. These dollars have to be able to be utilized for financial assistance to help with housing, along with economic development and then public infrastructure needs for communities. We notice in our region, our Fife County region, that all of our small communities all need a couple of the same things. They need housing and they need infrastructure needs, big time. And so this program is great because it can wrap it up into one grant project. So under small cities, like I said before, there's three main objectives that follow under HUD. They have to benefit low to moderate income people, so that would be kind of that'd be your housing objective, along with eliminating slum and blight conditions. So we have a commercial rehab portion that can be used under that requirement, along with the urgent community development need. The maximum funds that are awarded, you can get up to $600,000 worth of grant funds for one purpose, along with a max of 1.4 if you're doing a comprehensive application. So what a comprehensive application would be is if you're working with a community and they're going to be having some housing needs, along with some public infrastructure projects. So that's the max grant that you can get under the small cities funds. Funds are most commonly used for rehab for housing. That rehab housing can be used on owner-occupied properties, single-family rental properties, multifamily rental properties, along with public infrastructure projects. I was having a conversation with a gentleman earlier about the timeline when it comes to small cities. Small cities grant projects are long. We start working with our communities way in advance, just having those conversations with them. What are the needs that your community has right now? And what is the interest of those communities? Really from start to finish, I would say between 4 to 5 years these projects take because again, like I said, you're starting to have those conversations. The pre-applications that DEED requires are just around the corner. We have 2 applications going in this round, so November 15th, they are due. So before those applications are due, we're actually working with the communities on interest surveys during that time frame. If your community is deemed competitive with that pre-application, DEED's going to come back and say, okay, we want you to write a full application. And those applications are due in February 15th. And then there's another waiting game. You're sitting around waiting to hear if those dollars are going to be coming in. Typically, we're going to hear at the end of May, early June, if your community is going to receive those funds. Really, the time frame from there starts then at that point in time. You're going to have 3.5 years to implement all the projects that were included in your grant award from that time frame. Cam was talking about environmentals and all the policies. That starts right from the beginning. So you need to start working with your community right away to get all those things implemented so you can start getting those projects underway at that point in time. And as I said, all the money needs to be spent down within 3 years. There's ongoing reporting that takes place during that time, so you're consistently working with your local regional DEED rep. And I was sharing this morning that you need to get on their good side. You want them to have your back and be part of this project long before you're putting in your pre-application, because they're the ones who are going to be sitting at the table with their whole group deciding which projects are going to get funded this year. The city of Clarkfield is one of the communities that we are currently working with right now. We started having conversations with them, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, around their many needs. They've had lots of issues. It's a small community of 863 people. They had a brand new city administrator who had been on board for less than 6 months. And they had a public works director who had been on for 1 month. And they were having major public infrastructure needs. They needed a wastewater treatment facility, they needed an updated water tower, and then a storm sewer system update. If you'll see, they had 32 years of deferred maintenance on that water tower, and they needed their residents to consistently run their water on a daily basis in order to avoid freezing during the long winter months. So 17,000 gallons of water were being consumed daily because of this. And there was constant griping to their new city administrator about the sewer backups, the businesses that were getting flooded. It was disastrous at that point in time. That's where a lot of the collaboration came into play at that point. We worked a lot, like I said, with the city administrator and the public works director around their needs, and then we pulled in the city engineer. So it was kind of it's a two-part process with this grant itself. The city engineer was working on all the infrastructure things, while we were working on the housing and the commercial rehab portion, along with applying for the assistance to help with that water tower. The city engineer was responsible for obviously putting all the engineering reporting together, and then securing the funding with the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority along with rural development. Small cities will never be your first funder for any of these projects, but you can get $600,000. And in the communities that we work with, that's a lot of money. So we wanted to include and engage any type of funding source we could at that possibility. Under the project management, currently right now what we're working through is our engineers are the ones who are working with the actual contractors who are working on that wastewater treatment center, the storm sewer along with the water tower. What we do is our staff has to be on site as well, doing this Davis-Bacon, making sure that timesheets are correct, making sure that all the contractors are following those rules and regulations. And then we are also administering, like I said, the housing and the commercial rehab projects that are taking place in that city as well. There's currently 17 owner-occupied rehab projects that will take place there for low to moderate income families, along with six commercial projects will also be funded through that. So that's a great program, because under that housing thing, the housing grant portion of things, they can get up to $25,000 in grant funds, deferred grant, to be able to rehab their homes. When we're talking about housing and the needs in the communities, one of the things that we want to see is we want to be able to keep the current housing stock we have in our communities there. We also want to make sure that seniors are able to stay in their houses. They're not ready for the next step. We want to be able to make sure that they have the handicap accessible needs that they can to be able to stay within their houses. So this program is fabulous for that. And we also work closely with our Community Action Agency in our communities, because they really can assist them with kind of also finding some grant funds from other programs to be able to match to help with some of this. This might be hard to see. I don't know if you can see all these funding sources, but there's lots of different pots of money coming in there, like I had talked about. And this total project that's taking place down in Clarkfield is just over $24 million. So again, this is the wastewater treatment facility, the water tower, and then the storm sewer system. Small cities altogether here, let's see here, I'm looking over here, was just over $1.1 million. So those are straight grant dollars. I might be biased because I work a lot on this project, but in the communities that we work with, they're always looking for free grant money. Where can we get free money, free money? That doesn't happen, but this program really does have some good bang for your buck. We see time and time again that the contractors that these residents are using for their projects are also local contractors. So you're not only getting these homes and these commercial buildings kept up, you're also being able to support local contractors with the work that they're doing as well. And that's Clarkfield. Any other questions about the small cities? Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yeah, you're good for time.
For infrastructure projects, if a community, say that they don't have an engineer on staff, they would have to procure an engineer, obviously, but would the preliminary engineering report, would that be in the pre-app, or would that full-fledged PER be a part of the full application?
It is part of the pre-app as well, because like I said, those, like the public facilities funds and the rural development funds, those have to be secured before small cities will come into play. So those engineering reports have already been part of that process. So that is included, yes. Okay?
Just kind of out of curiosity, you may have a follow-up question pending answer. Because you were talking about that they had residents that have to continuously keep water going to keep it from freezing. So was that cost being passed on to the residents that had to do this?
It was being passed on to consumers and the city as well, because they were having to have staff monitoring this on a 24-hour basis. This public works director that was on for 1 month, I mean, there was days where he was the only staff person there for hours upon hours. So yes.
So do you know if they're doing it, like if they did, or if there's been any like special considerations for like the economic sensitive populations there, like the elderly or lower income or anything else on fixed?
Well, the public facilities portion of this does have to be tied back to the low to moderate income households. in this community itself, in order to qualify, well, actually, all of the small cities, in order to use public infrastructure dollars, your city has to qualify. You have to have over 51% of your residents fall into that category itself. So, this community was not showing up as a community that fell into that, so we actually had to do some preliminary work with the city. We had to do income surveys citywide to determine if they qualified for it. So there was lots of work that took place even before we got to a starting point with this. And then DEED has to approve that survey work that you did. You have to be able to prove, I mean, there was door knocking, there was visiting apartment buildings, they had their city crew, their crew guys going from door to door for some of the residents in order for us to be able to get enough of a survey to get that through.
And you had to have a certain percentage
Yep.
return rate.
Yes, you do. So we were watching that number like a hawk, and then we would send the guys up, nope, you gotta hit this street up, or, I mean, we knew those addresses. Yep.
All right, Wayne.
Oh, I have one more thing that just might be worth mentioning. It's not a question, but I think you can, well, maybe it's not in Minnesota through your program, but can't you use CDBG dollars for senior centers and boys and girls clubs too?
You can,
And then, but then in that case, aren't your seniors, regardless of income, aren't they kind of like categorically low and moderate income? And
it depends.
Okay.
They can be used on like community centers and things like that as well.
Yeah.
But you always want to make sure that you're working with your deed rep around that to determine eligibility
Okay.
based on that. So it is an option, but just like a boys and girls club or something, there has to be another objective with that as well.
Okay.
My understanding is, I don't know if you can speak to that, that's, at least in recent years, that's been a pretty low priority for
It
me.
is, yep. They will tell you prior to the pre-applications, their percentages of funds and where they're gonna be directed, whether it's going, how much is gonna go to housing, how much is going to public infrastructure, that sort of thing. So you'll have an idea as to where the priorities are gonna be going.
All right, so again, my name is Wayne Hurley. I'm with West Central Initiative, Region 4 in Fergus Falls. For those of you that aren't very familiar with our organization, we are not an RDC. We are a regional development organization, however. We're a nonprofit foundation. And so we have a history in our region. As some of you are probably aware, there are 3 areas of the state, plus the metro, that don't have RDCs. We're one of those. Our RDC was disbanded back in the early 80s, and we, over time, picked up a couple of the functions that the rest of the RDCs around the state do. So we are an economic development district, so we have that relationship with federal EDA. We have the same planning contract with MnDOT to do transportation planning in our region. So we do some of the same functions as an RDC. Not everything is the same, however. So as I go through some of the slides, you'll pick up maybe a few nuanced things that we maybe do a little bit different than some of the RDCs do. So one of the things that we work on is Safe Routes to School. And there's a variety of different things we do with Safe Routes to School. Like a lot of the RDCs, we contract with MnDOT, or they contract with us actually, to do Safe Routes plans in communities in our region. So that is one of the roles that we play with Safe Routes to School. We also do a lot of advocacy and education around Safe Routes. We try to stay on top of the communities that have done plans to try to encourage them to continue to do some of the work. When they pull their Safe Routes teams together, basically we try to get them to continue to meet and do the surveys. There's surveys and there's tally forms that are done as part of the Safe Routes planning process. So we try to encourage them to continue to do those things. It gets challenging because over a period of time we've done, I think now 17 Safe Routes plans in our region. And so we can't handhold every single one of those communities and organize the meetings for them and walk them through everything like we did during the planning process. So it gets a little bit challenging, and so I would love to have another staff person in our office to do Safe Route stuff. We have talked about that. So that's kind of what we do with Safe Routes. I'm going to go through these slides moderately quickly, because I'd rather have some conversation about this stuff than me just talking at everybody, so I'll go through it, and anything that I go through, if a question comes up, you can either stop me while I'm talking, or we can do them at the end or whatever, so. Transportation Alternatives Programs, I don't know if folks are familiar with that program, I know the transportation planners are, because they work with it all the time, but basically that's the federal funding that MnDOT uses for projects that are considered to be alternative transportation projects, which includes things like bike trails, multi-use paths. There's actually several different categories that are eligible under this program. Safe Routes to School actually got lumped under the Transportation Alternatives Program. So if a community is going for federal Safe Routes funding, it goes through the TAP program. So there's also a state Safe Routes to School program for infrastructure as well, so that's a separate program. But we basically facilitate the TAP program for MnDOT District 4 and help communities when they've got projects, work through the application process, make sure that the projects are eligible, kind of give them some guidance as they're putting their projects together, and basically just kind of helping them along until we get to the application process. And then we also facilitate there's a subcommittee that meets to talk about how we're going to rank the projects and which ones are going to get funded and which ones are not. And that's always a challenging process. I'm sure like everybody else in the room, everybody's got tons of money, right, for everything. So we have, I think, typically in an average year, 3 times in requests what we have available for funding. We typically have, anywhere from 2 to 2.5 million in requests. So we have $700,000 available every year to distribute. So it's challenging because, as all of you know, again, the projects don't get cheaper over time. Everything just keeps getting more expensive. And since I've been doing this, I actually maybe have Cam beat in terms of duration of my career at the region, but in the 21 years I've been doing this, we've gone from 600,000 to 700,000 in that entire time period. So it has not gone up drastically in terms of the funding that's available. So we do as many projects as we can with the limited money that's available. We assisted with the MnDOT District 4 bike plan. Again, I know all of the regions around the state are involved in these projects, and so we did a lot of work as far as facilitating the committee meetings and the public input sessions and that kind of stuff, so that MnDOT could build on their statewide bike plan and kind of drill down a little bit to the district level to get a little bit finer detail in terms of the sorts of projects that they wanted to be looking at in terms of their future facilities as they're doing their planning. Trying to get out ahead of things and thinking about where they could put, for example, maybe there's a multi-use trail that goes alongside of a highway, or perhaps there is a place where they have 2-foot shoulders and there's a need for 6 or 8 foot shoulders, for example. So help them quite a bit with that process. That just wrapped up about 6 or 7 months ago. We are in the process right now putting together a regional active transportation plan. That's so when I mentioned that we have the same MnDOT contract as the RDCs, it's actually not true. Ours is a separate contract. So all of you, except for Deb in the back, she works with me at WCI, but all the RDCs go through the planning office at MnDOT, and I forget what the acronym is now for the planning office. Anyways, they change it every about 3 or 4 years, just keep us on our toes. And so all of the RDCs go through that planning office. Ours goes through consultant services, which is the same office at MnDOT that works with the people that are building the highways. And so they always get very confused about, what are we doing? This is a planning, with a nonprofit organization. So there's always this explanation every 2 years when we renew our contract. But, so as part of our contract, we're gonna be doing this active transportation plan, which is kind of going like a step beyond the MnDOT District 4 bike plan, just to talk a little bit more kind of on a finer detail at the community level about what communities are looking for active transportation. And so active transportation basically means having the ability for folks to get around their communities without getting into an automobile. So walking, biking, those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Wayne, who's driving this? Like, is this, are you in your office saying, wouldn't it be nice if we had an active transportation plan for the region, or is it coming from someone?
Yeah, so historically, going back in the past, because we've had those interesting conversations with the consultant services office at MnDOT. They've always come back and they've pushed back on our contract to say, what's the product? What is the end product that is being delivered to us? Because with everybody else they work with, the end product is, this highway got repaved, or, you know, that sort of thing. So the end product, they wanted a physical, tangible product, not just planning. And so we were putting together either a trails plan or a regional transportation plan. So we started with the regional transportation plan, and we're like, we don't need to update this every 2 years really. So then the next contract, we did a regional trails plan. We started alternating. And so when it came time to renew the trails plan, we thought, you know, we need to go beyond that and kind of get it more inclusive of a variety of different transportation options. Because the MnDOT District 4 Bike Plan was kind of covering what we would have done in our old regional trails plan. So that's where that's coming from. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. A lot of you are obviously very familiar with this because a lot of you are working on the regional transportation coordinating councils. So that's something that we've been involved with. We are actually not doing it in our region. Our community action agency is the lead agency on that project in our region. So I think we might be one of the only ones that is not doing it from the regional level. So,
Wayne, we don't do it.
oh, you guys aren't either? Okay. So, so us in Region 9, maybe the few that are not working on this in a direct way. That said, I'm still directly involved because I'm the chair of the council, and I'm not working on it from the staff perspective, but on the coordinating council itself, and kind of providing that historical context for, you know, those of you that have been around for a while, know that the RDCs and us have been doing those transportation coordination plans every 5 years or so for the last 15 years. And so just kind of providing that history and the context and letting everybody know how we got to where we are today, that we're actually moving forward with some implementation, hopefully. So that's kind of what our role is there. We work a lot on making our region and our communities bicycle friendly, and I've had a few conversations with folks today already about some of the work that we do. And so some of the stuff that we do is a lot of advocacy sorts of things, and we work very closely with the League of American Bicyclists on their Bike Friendly America program. And so they've got 3 different components to their Bike Friendly America program. And the league is basically, they're based out of Washington, D.C., so they cover the entire country. So they have the Bicycle Friendly Community Program, which a lot of you may be familiar with. They have the Bicycle Friendly Business Program and the Bicycle Friendly University Program. And so we work with communities, businesses, and colleges in our region to help them become more bike friendly and apply for recognition through the League of American Bicyclists for that program. So this is a photo from Fergus Falls for our 30 Days of Biking celebration that we did, kind of our kickoff group photo and ride. This guy right here is Patrick Stevenson. He is the founder of 30 Days of Biking. So he was actually in Fergus Falls with his buddy Mario right here. And they came up and helped us celebrate and kick the event off. So we do that every year. That's in April. So if you want more info about 30 Days of Biking, let me know. Yeah.
And you used the word in there, you said advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like you are able to, because of the difference in your organization, that you can be more of an advocate for certain things than maybe other RDCs can be because we take our direction from our boards? And how, is there a difference in there? Because you do a lot of work with biking.
Right, yeah, I would say probably there is. I mean, our board has given us a lot of leeway in terms of doing advocacy sorts of things. And when I say advocacy, it's more about probably education and encouragement than it is about, like, we're not lobbying, for example. We don't do a lot of that. We're a little more limited in terms of lobbying. But we will, encourage communities. We'll go into a community and we'll say, hey, you know what? You guys are doing a lot of cool stuff. You should think about applying for this program, and we can help you with your application. And so those are the sorts of things. Then we'll do some education and that kind of stuff as well. So, and actually that ties into the next one, which is Complete Streets. So these next few slides are all from Glenwood, Minnesota. I've got 3 that I'll just kind of pop through pretty quick. A lot of you know Mary Saffron from MnDOT, former RDC employee from back a few years ago. I won't say how many exactly. But this is a new Complete Streets project in Glenwood, And basically what you see here is they've got, this is before the striping was done on the highway, but here's Highway 28 in downtown Glenwood. This is a curb-separated bike lane, so the curb is right here. So this is above the curb. Then they've got amenity zone right here. So you get trees, some street furniture that's permanent in the sidewalk, or in the amenity zone. And then you've got the sidewalk over here that fronts the buildings. So this was a project, this was funded with Transportation Alternatives funding. Got another kind of zoomed in, so you got, these nice bike racks, the street furniture, the plantings. So that project was a, like I said, a TAP project. How am I doing on time, Nicole?
You're totally good.
Okay. So, we get involved in a lot of complete streets projects, and this is again where some of that advocacy sorts of work comes in. One of the things, and Cam and I were just chatting about this before the session started, we actually go out, we're fairly proactive, because we actually had a project that was a complete streets project in Battle Lake that was kind of, it happened in a way that MnDOT said, we don't want to do these in this way anymore, so let's find a better way to do this. What happened was, we had our Transportation Advisory Committee meeting, and one of the guys on the TAC saw the STIP, which is the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. So that's the 4-year list of projects that MnDOT puts together every year. Saw Highway 78 in Battle Lake in the following year and goes, hey, can we do some stuff with that project? And MnDOT said, well, we guess, we'll try. And they did, and they pulled out a really, really cool project. But they said, we can't continue to do these projects like this. It's already in the STIP, it's scoped out, we've got the funding already allocated for it, and now we're changing the entire project, and we can't do this. Because all MnDOT was gonna do was mill and overlay. And what they ended up doing was significantly widening the sidewalks, kind of not unlike what you see here. This is very similar to what Battle Lake looks like, except this is sidewalk instead of a dedicated bike lane. So they did this project in Battle Lake.
Finish your thought.
Okay, so they did this project in Battle Lake, and basically what it was, so we said, and we need to get out ahead of these a little bit further. So what we started doing was going into what's called the CHIP, which is the Capital Highway Investment Plan. That's the 10-year list of projects that MnDOT thinks they're gonna do. It's not programmed out at that point. So we sit down with MnDOT and we'll start looking through the projects and say, okay, these projects in years 7, 8, 9, 10, out of these, well, this one, and we'll pick out a few that look like they could be good complete streets type projects. We will go into the community, and when I say we, it's WCI, it's Partnership for Health, or Verizon SHIP, which are our 2 SHIP groups in our region. We work very closely with them, and MnDOT District 4. We'll go into the community, we'll say, hey, you guys have a project coming up in 2025, and we think that there could be some options here for you to look at a complete streets type project, and then just have that conversation with them and get out ahead of the planning so that when it gets into the STIP, it's already scoped out as a complete streets project.
What does CHIP stand for again?
CHIP is the Capital Highway Investment Plan. So Ryan, you had a question?
Yeah, question might be a strong word.
A thought I'm using?
Yeah, your point about advocacy and the question about did the organizational differences drive that? And what I'm hearing you say, and I think about some of our experiences with this sort of work, is it's really more about leadership and providing that leadership to your communities, and maybe you speak a little bit more about that, because that's kind of what I hear. It's really about sort of here's why this is important to your community, and here's how we can be a resource.
Yeah, it is. It's about leadership. It's about education. It's about kind of getting out ahead of these things. And I think one of the things that we all as professionals in our field have to remember is that we are professionals in our field. And you go into these small communities, and I don't have to tell anybody in the room this, but you've got these city clerks that are wearing 18 different hats, and they don't know about complete streets. They don't know about TAP. They don't know about safe routes. And so we view our role as going in and providing the knowledge to them to say, hey, these things are available to you, and if you want to do this, we can help you do it. One of the unique roles that we have, and I shouldn't say unique, because you guys could all do this too. When we partner with SHIP, we can come in with some funding also, because our SHIP, and I don't know how the SHIP groups across the state work, if they do similar, I know that they're allowed to do similar things, but our SHIP groups program in some money for planning. And so when we have complete streets projects, what happens is SHIP will come in and say, we've got $5,000. Now, this is where we're a little more unique. We also have planning funds, so we can come in and match that and give the community $10,000, for example, to do a plan, a complete streets plan, which they can then roll out to MnDOT when MnDOT's gonna scope the project and gets them out ahead of the curve. So, but you can still do that even without, you know, with just the SHIP dollars and match it some other way from the community or whatever. So there's a lot of opportunities there, I think, with SHIP and working with them to get these sorts of projects done. Yeah, we'll go to this guy and then Bob.
Who's responsible for like, snow removal or maintenance on the bike path / your mending?
That gets asked in every one of these, and the answer is different in every community.
Okay.
So, a lot of communities, they will clear snow from this portion. You know, the city will. Sometimes they make the storefronts, the property owners clear the snow off of that portion. Well, then when it comes to something like this, what do you do? What we've seen so far is most communities are saying, we're gonna clear this sort of thing. A lot of times, you know, again, it's kind of a question of how they're already set up and how they're doing it currently. But I have not seen a community yet where, and this is the only one of these in our region. So it's kind of a unique case right now. So we're gonna kind of see how that plays out over the next few years. Because we've got 3 or 4 more projects that are similar to this in the pipeline right now. So, did you have a?
No, Wayne, the only thing I was gonna re-emphasize a little bit, you touched on it, is the whole planning piece is huge when it comes to like transportation alternatives, safe routes to school funding. I mean, they look for a planning effort behind that to support it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the funded safe routes to school plan. It can be an alternative comprehensive plan, but that planning piece adds a lot of clout to those applications.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, we really look to that in District 4. That's one of the highest priority items that we have, is to say, has this project been identified somehow in a local plan or through a planning process, rather than it just being, you know, the Chamber of Commerce said, oh, we should build a trail from downtown to the lake, you know. We want to see a little bit more thought into it. Eddie?
And there's different levels of planning processes. For example, your safe routes to school process is very robust, I guess is a word, versus, nothing against this, but an engineer sitting in their office and taking it to the county board for approval. Plan. We have seen the whole gambit, and the more robust it is, the more public it is, it seems to have more buy-in.
Yep.
Just saying.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, and what we're seeing now with the TAP program is mostly complete streets and safe routes projects, because they've all gone through those planning processes.
I have a strange question.
Yeah.
In this example here, is this little pathway here on both sides? Or
Yeah,
just
so-
on one side?
So this is a one-directional bike lane, and like I said,
Yep.
the paint was not put on. They actually have bike symbols on here now
Okay.
indicating which direction this goes. So this exact setup
Is
is
on the
mirrored
other side,
on the
too.
other side of the road.
Okay, just one.
Now, that's not true for all projects. There was one in Alexandria where, and they didn't do a bike lane, but they did a really wide sidewalk, kind of like what Battle Lake did on one side, and the other side, it looks just like, just that piece.
Okay.
And the reason that they did it is because what they were originally planning was a two-way bike lane right here, and they decided not to have bikes on that portion. And so, one, it's just kind of lopsided, which is kind of weird, but, so, yeah. But in this case in particular, that's a one-way, and then it's the other way.
Okay.
Yep. Should probably give Nicole a turn here too, I suppose, huh?
We do more questions at the end of it too.
Okay, yeah,
No,
okay,
Here, you talk and I'll put my,
Okay.
if you have any more slides,
Nope.
it's just.
Nope, that's the last one, yes. Any more, one more quick one before Nicole goes?
What funding source do you use to do the advocacy?
So, basically, we overmatched the MnDOT contract, and so it's our own funding, yeah, for that kind of stuff, yeah.
Because I know we have to be careful
Yeah,
on how we use the trunk highway funds.
right, yep, yeah, that stuff isn't identified in our MnDOT contract,
Gotcha.
and so it kind of falls outside of that, so,
Thank you.
yep.
Yeah, sure. Keep myself on track here. All right, I'm gonna talk about Highway 169. The portion that we're gonna be talking about is the innovative financing. This was a project that was between Mankato and St. Peter in south central Minnesota. If you're not familiar, well, I'm not familiar with one section of 169, but it is our main corridor, north-south. especially for southern Minnesota down to Iowa. But to give you a little bit of context before I jump in, this project started, I started at Region 9 February 27th of 2012. I came from the private sector and nonprofit, and so I'll talk about my ignorance to the public sector as part of my situation here with this project. Long story short, back in 2012, we had federal EDA. At that time, we had Dennis Foldenauer was our economic development rep. He was in town meeting with myself and Rhonda Alice, who Cam mentioned this morning, and to give a little shout out to. She was a Region 9 staffer at that time, and spoiler alert, she's at MnDOT now, partially a lot of reasons because of this project. So, good and bad. But Dennis Foldenauer had kind of asked us, what are some projects that you have for me? And we were sort of rattling off, well, Highway 14, we want to have 4-lane, and it's the safety concerns, it's horrible, most deadly highway. He didn't take the bait at that, okay. Well, Highway 14 going east and west in our region, if you're eastbound truck and you want to go north onto 169, there's no good interchange. Nah, he wasn't biting at that. And so every project we were kind of thrown at him, he was just like, no, there's no money there, there's no money there. And I finally just said in my ignorance, well, where the hell is the money? And he said, well, we have disaster dollars. I was like, okay, what does that mean? And so Rhonda and I kind of looked at each other and it's like, well, we have a highway that floods all the time. 100-year floods that are happening like every third year. And he said, well, tell me more about that. And we're like, well, it's our main corridor, we are hogs, corn, soybeans, manufacturing, commuters, etc. He's like, okay, keep talking. And we're like, well, when it floods, it creates a huge detour, it creates an economic development disaster. And he's like, I like it. So that's where all of this kind of spawned off of. So here we go. So to kind of help tell the story and to get all of the other colleagues back in the Chicago office to get their interest and say, why the hell do we care about highway flooding? We had to then tell the story as to what is the economic impact. So some of this data is going to be old, spoiler alert as well. Some of my PowerPoint slides here are, I've used this before. So if it's in present tense, it is past tense now. So some of these numbers I would argue are even larger now in 2019 than they were back in 2013, etc. So, but to just give you an idea, again, our main industries is very much agriculture, manufacturing, etc. So we were able to kind of, I'm not going to read through it to tell you about it, but to kind of help tell that story, to get their attention and explain the why. And then also more economic impacts. So again, when we talk about the trucking industry and moving all of the ag products, etc., manufacturing, and the individuals, kind of helping tell the story as to, between Mankato and St. Peter alone, the commercial traffic daily, as well as the commuter shed between Mankato and St. Peter, and then also St. Peter to Le Sueur. So we're going to be talking about a couple of different sections of Highway 169. And so again, helping tell that story of how many commuters we have every single day, how many trucks are moving, etc. Really helps tell the story. All right, so this is 2014, some of the information here. And so this project, it was raising the grade at 4 different spots of the highway. So again, if you're familiar with Mankato and St. Peter, I apologize, I'm telling you stuff you already know. But we're going to be talking about the southbound only. That is because in Mankato, between Mankato and St. Peter, we have the Minnesota River. And then right here, we also have like a lot of bluffs. And so it's a really unique situation. And so with the river, if you're going northbound, it creates a lot of environmental issues. And so what happened was the southbound section was going to be getting raised, so we kind of avoiding all the environmental issues. And so if and when the road floods, which it has, but not this section since, then they can at least still have 2-lane traffic, not at least, it's not 4-lane traffic, but you can still keep the road open. And so we were talking about thick mill overlay and then grade raises as well. And again, it was just shy of about a 10-mile section. This is looking northbound in the city of St. Peter here. And so what happened, and you'll see a few references, a couple of slides that talk about Highway 22. That is going the other direction. And so what happens is when Highway 22 would also flood, luckily the city of St. Peter has a Lumacraft that has boats, because you would need a boat to get in and out of St. Peter, basically because it would create an island. And so really creating economic development disaster for not just that community, but all of the neighboring communities as well. And again, so helping tell the story that these 100-year floods were happening about every 3 years, and so really kind of helping point that out. We were also then, at a similar time, we ended up doing a climate change vulnerability adaptation plan, and that was kind of part of that plan as well. I won't go too into that, but really helping tell the story of saying these 100-year floods, this is completely changing what we used to call these historic floods were just happening way too often. Right here, this is the city of St. Peter. This is the Traverse des Sioux treaty site, if you're familiar with that, just to give you a little bit of perspective of where we're talking. That's looking northeast in the city of St. Peter. Another section that was flooded on Highway 169, this is just north of St. Peter, and so this was not an irregular, this happened a lot more often than you would like to think. And so that kind of just gives you an idea as well. So this photo's from 2010, but again, you could put any year on there, and it almost had happened again about every third year. So this is the timeline. So again, when the conversation started in 2012, it was disaster dollars that were, I believe, were 2011 disaster declaration, and then a lot of the projects really we were kind of rolling up our sleeves in 2013 and then 2014 with the work. So again, when I talk about Highway 22, that's the other side here, but we're talking about 169 for the most part. So it talks about the lane closures, and so again, this was all of the wording of what was going to be happening, just to give you an idea of kind of what that timeline looked like. And so again, the 2014 work was raising the grade and reconstructing 2 miles of Highway 169 to southbound only again, and then preserving and resurfacing the 9 miles of 169, and then revising access to the city of St. Peter at the north and southbound lanes. All right, so we talked about already was disaster dollars, and so again, kind of going back to Cam's point earlier, what you think EDA might be excited about or not excited about, you could be wrong. So my overall point of this whole presentation is don't be afraid to ask dumb questions. You never know where it will lead. This ended up being a $9.8 million grant. It was the largest federal EDA grant in recent history. Until I heard Cam's presentation today, we had believed and had been told that it was the first time that MnDOT had worked with the federal EDA. They didn't really know about each other, or well, at least MnDOT had never thought about partnering with EDA, so maybe that's just for District 7, I don't know, but at that time...
The thing with ours was just basically highway entrances,
Oh, okay.
so it wasn't really anything to do with highway entrances.
Okay, I'm not a liar then, because I've done this presentation before years ago, so give me grace, but we had always said that they had never worked together, because it was brand new. And so also keep in mind, I'm going out of order here, but Region 9 got not a dime from this. This was all work that we did just because it was the right thing to do, and really we were the connector. And once the awful paperwork of EDA happened, it was like, enjoy MnDOT. But then they also were the ones that had all the money to do the project. So just kind of give you a little context there. Again, you know, we are an EDD like the rest of you, but to talk about the timing of the disaster declaration. And again, right now, EDA is talking to us again, because all of Region 9 right now is in the disaster declaration, so we're trying to get creative and thinking what projects might be able to come out of this as well this next time. So, and then also, okay, so MnDOT received the $9.8 million in some odd sense. What we had said before was we believe that typical grant like this, the dollar amount would be about $1.3 million. And so the then director for the Chicago office, she ended up coming up and doing a regional bus tour we started doing after this project, so we do it once a year. And she had said, you know, Nicole, she was sitting next to me on the bus, she goes, I caught a lot of slack for this one. And I was like, oh, no, thank you, no, we appreciate it. And she's like, no, you need to know, like, I could have done 9 other grants, but we did this one. And I was like, and we appreciate that. Cam is challenged to try to beat our record of EDA dollars, so bring it. We're at about 14 million in some sense, I believe. Cato math. Okay, back to my point. So the highway was flooded 8 times in the last 20 years. Again, this number could be more because this is an outdated slide. Obviously, most significantly in October 2010 and then May. But again, I mean, the whole point of the story is, and then it flooded again, and then again. So I'm not going to read all this to you, but the total investment was, you can see the number here. MnDOT was really open saying this wasn't even on our 20-year plan. Without the $9.8 million, they wouldn't have even been able to think about doing the project. It just wouldn't have been possible. And we were able to help tell the story, to leverage the dollars by getting their attention by advocating and or, you know, just being naggy, I guess, of all of the talents. My planners are all in the room. They're the smart folks. I'm the one that has the influencing skills and the strengths finders that are not always the most helpful, but sometimes nagging helps. My middle name was supposed to be Andrea, what it would have spelled nag, so that's a Latin step, but maybe it was meant to be. So this was what we did a good job is helping tell the story and really being influencing to EDA to get the money to MnDOT to say that this is going to create 500 jobs and then leverage at least $10 million into more private investment. I think I'm doing okay for time here. All right. So I was programmed for 2016 flood mitigation. I won't go through all these numbers here. Again, it's about 8.8 miles of flood mitigation. You kind of see some of those other numbers here. So the EDA funds of their portion was only for the flood mitigation, not the pavement preservation work. So MnDOT came in to do some other work. They're kind of while we're at it type kind of stuff. And then also something that was really important to me and others, but the median work was also added that while it's not the most attractive thing, that there's cable median barriers that have been added to the center. Not that you care, but I'll tell you anyway, because I've got the microphone. One of our family friends, my husband's best friend, she was driving back from working at Patrick's in St. Peter and slipped on ice and went into the other northbound lane and a truck hit her and died on impact. And so, oh, that's my alarm to remind me to wrap it up. So, there's a lot of stories like that, not as bad as Highway 14, but having these cable median barriers, a lot of you know that at least if and when there's an accident, it hopefully won't be a fatality. It could just be a bad accident, but not a fatality. So there's some other work that got done because of this project that was very meaningful to a lot of us. So again, this is in Nicollet County, between Mankato and St. Peter again. This is a great county park here, 7 Mile Creek. There's part of the park is over here. There's a tunnel underneath. You can go, I used to go horseback riding over here with my horse. It's really a beautiful park, but you can see this creates a little bit of an issue. In this photo, Rhonda and I were actually at NATO when we had the grant application in, and we were at the policy conference, and this was like the photo, I believe, that day while we were out in DC, going, yep, all right, flooded again, helps prove our point. All right, more photos. It's a beautiful area. It's a great stretch of Minnesota, especially when the leaves are changing color, etc. Okay, let's see what else. And this is kind of, again, along the bluffs. Jesse James's crew used to hang out and hide in the caves. Story. This kind of just shows it's hard to see, but you can kind of just see the different sections of where it was exactly raised up. And then also, I don't have the details, but if you want to know more of the geeky stuff, I got a different PowerPoint from some of the engineers that did this project. They presented at the Minnesota Transportation Conference a couple years back. They did all brand new different technologies were used because of the bluff and the river as to how to do the overlay and the words I don't know, the engineering stuff, but it's pretty cool. So again, this just kind of talks about the timeline. Let me see if I'm missing anything else. I already did that.
You projected 500 jobs. Would you have any idea how close you came?
I don't. No, I honestly, I wish we could have had a better pulse on that. I don't know. I can tell you that the Mankato economies for an MSA, like we're kicking butt. I don't know. The short answer is no, but the long answer is it has proven to be a fantastic investment, is what I would say. All right, let me see what else here. I'll wrap it up. So while we didn't receive any money, it was probably the best thing that's ever happened for Region 9 is because we really were the toast of the town, the exact wording of the city of St. Peter. We got the most PR possible out of this, and it really helped kind of just improve our image, which we needed to work on. And it's just been a fantastic project, and it's something that impacts all of the team here. We're on that road constantly every day. A lot of our staff live in St. Peter, commuting back and forth, etc. And then just to kind of, we were able to then also do MnDOT had a big ribbon cutting kind of ceremony and whatnot for the project when it was official. Jay Williams, who was then the Assistant Secretary for Department of Commerce, Federal EDA, flew in from DC and presented, and we had the staff from Klobuchar and Franken's team were there, and then Congressman Walz presented as well. It was really a great way to really honestly show collaboration, not be cheesy about it, but to show how we worked well with MnDOT, introduce them to the EDA, all of that good stuff. So, with that, I think we're right about time, but if people have questions, you can catch us afterwards and or look at the time here. But, we're 2 minutes over, so catch us after, I guess. So thank you. And then work your way down to the Taste of Minnesota is next, I believe. Okay, there, I did my plug.
I didn't bring my phone.
Well, hopefully we just do it the old fashioned way and talk.
Sitting in these chairs. Feeling rugged right now.
Yes, we basically were like Rhonda was our transportation planner and the community development department, and so she's a working relationship with